saying hello. I'm Allan Friesen. Acapellas with me is Brother Scott Sweetman. How you doing, Brother Scott?
I'm doing great, Allan. How about you?
Great, thank you. I was off a little bit last couple days, not quite 100%, but I'm back to 100% again. Welcome to another edition of H3 Health, Hope, and Happiness. Our topic tonight, I know we said we were going to have the lovely ladies, Rihanna and Robin from Seamless Cares, but we got a lot of snow around here, and it meant that their employees couldn't show up to do work, so they're taking care of their customers to make sure their customers get looked after. And so instead, we got a topic, languishing to flourishing. Is that what it's called, Scott?
That's exactly right, and it sprouts from an article written by Adam Grant. Have you ever heard the name Adam Grant?
I have not, no.
Well, you might want to look into him. You and him share a lot of qualities. One of his most sort of well-known quote is, "The most meaningful way to succeed is to help others succeed."
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that's right up your alley, right?
I like this guy already. I've never met him, but I like him, yeah.
He's an organizational psychologist, best-selling author. He wrote a book called Hidden Potential. He does a bunch of TED Talk stuff. He does podcasts, and he's got a newsletter that reaches 200,000 people plus. So
wow.
Pretty big, yeah. I ran into him on Asana, which is a piece of software that I use. And when I read it, I thought, oh, this is something we should talk about. Pretty interesting. Languishing is what caught me first. What a great word. Haven't heard that one in a long time. Not a common word, is it?
No, it is not. No, not by any means. But yeah, so and it's not depression. It's just low energy or something. Is that kind of what it is?
Well,
or
that's a great way. So he wrote this. When did Adam write this? 2021, July 13th. Oh, my birthday. 2021, not my birthday, obviously. I'd be a little bit younger than I appear on screen if that was true. And so this is middle of pandemic, or just coming out of the pandemic, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, middle. Anyway, and he wrote it on mostly about people suffering in work right now. So Anatomy of Work Index, which he quotes, 76% of workers are struggling to disconnect from work, and they're taking work home with them. They're not, they don't disengage from it. So work becomes pretty much a 24/7 kind of loading on their emotions and their resources. And I know I suffer from that. I have trouble disengaging. I know you do. We're always thinking about, how we can help people, and we get an idea and it's like, oh yeah. But there's a price you pay for that. And one of the psychological prices that you pay for that is, and in 2021, 7 out of 10 workers said they had experienced burnout. Really high, right?
That is high. Yeah, exactly. 7 out of 10. I mean, so they're just, a lot of times people that are in that situation, then they would be, they talk about that as being what? Presenteeism, like where you're there, but you're not really contributing because you just don't have the capacity to do so, right? So it's not absenteeism, it's being present, but not being able to fully contribute, right?
Well, yeah, and that's what Adam Grant wants to share with us is, the idea, how do you go from languishing to flourishing? Nice. And it's really interesting how he talks about languishing. It's an old word, and I'll just sort of lay out and point for him kind of how he uses it. He talks about being the neglected middle child of mental health. It's not depression because you still have hope. You're not burned out because you still have some energy, but you feel aimless, hard to focus. Sounds like a millennial. No. I tease my daughters about that all the time. They don't identify as millennials, but they are. So
you're going to get us flamed.
Oh, for sure. That one will get us flamed. Yeah, the millennial is strong in the internet. We'll get it. We'll get that one. But yeah, just that idea of sort of listlessness, and that's where that great word languish comes in. It sort of has that, to me, languish, I think of somebody languishing up a hill carrying something heavy. It's a struggle. It's not like they've given up. It's not like they've been defeated. they're still going, but they just, there's no passion or love in that. Is that good imagery? Does that relate?
Yeah, I think I like that. Do you also think it kind of ties into with the word malaise?
Yes, yeah, that's another one.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, malaise is a great word. I think that we're doing great on the vocabulary tonight, right? So he talks about that's what languishing is, and he talked about how the pandemic and post-pandemic, a lot of people were like that, and a lot of people still. I talk to people, and
wait a minute, Scott. I got another word. Ennui.
Ennui. Oh, that's a winner. Ennui wins.
Oh, okay. Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to try and keep my witty comments to myself. Carry on.
Oh, did you get in trouble? No, ennui is wonderful. That's a great word. Did you want to throw a definition out on ennui?
Well, I think it aligns very nicely with languishing or malaise. That basically just a kind of not in a very engaged, caring type point, like nothing. You're just like, oh, it is what it is, kind of a thing, right? That kind of stuff. And at times, that's probably an appropriate thing, right? To truly kind of disengage and relax and just kind of spend time with yourself. But if it's on a continuous basis, well, then it certainly isn't something that motivates or feels good. Your energy's not good. Your energy is very low in that circumstance, right? So is the way that I understand the description of ennui.
Well, you actually took us off topic, but to the truth behind the topic. And I think when we started, I said this idea came from a listener, and they sent me information on an article that talks about obsession with happiness, right? And so I read the title and I thought, oh, this is going to be a flame, right? And it really wasn't. What it was talking about is how for a lot of people, they're obsessed with the idea of happiness, and it's like junk food. There's no calories in it. And how happiness has to have meaning and purpose behind it, or it is empty calories, right? It becomes a cult of, oh, I'm happy. Are you happy? Yes, I'm happy. Are you happy? Oh, yes, I'm happy. When you're dying inside, right?
Right.
You're taking drugs, you're drinking alcohol, you're, impulse shopping, you're broke because you're gambling, all of the things that sort of, oh, I'm happy, but they don't have any meaning. They don't have any resonance. They don't have
sort of, if I'm following along what you're saying, sort of an artificial experience of happiness as opposed to an authentic experience of happiness.
Yeah, I think that we would word it that way, but I think a lot of people, the answer to that is, well, who's to define what makes me happy? Maybe gambling all my money away makes me happy. What right do you have to tell me it's not real happiness?
Right.
Good question. But what's the purpose in it? Like, what do you get out of it? Do you then spend hours and weeks trying to hide the fact from your partner, or worrying about how you're going to pay your mortgage or make your, what I mean? Like, sure. Yeah. I'm not, and this article was in no way defining what was happiness, but it was saying that unless you can define, what the purpose is, what this happiness gives you, what you get out of it and what it gives to the world around you, that it is like empty calories. You can eat all you want, and you're just going to have to keep eating more. It's like potato chips, right?
Yeah.
And so empty happiness is like junk food in that way. And that, when I was researching that brought me across Adam Grant's article, because one of the things that's talked about in this other article, and I'm not ready to talk about it yet because I have to do some more research, but it talks about languishing and how languishing often accompanies false happiness or junk food happiness, or, as you said. We talked about that before. What's the actual, there is a psychiatric term. We talked about it. True happiness? I'll have to look it up. Anyway, you know what I'm saying, right? And so that brought me to the anguish, and I thought we should talk about that. But I think there's a point in that, and we'll look into it. I think there is an obsession with empty happiness, right? Not defined by us, but defined by the people that are actually searching it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of just a little clip I have that came in my inbox about an author. She's a psychologist, and her comment was about, you can have 10,000 Facebook friends, but you don't have one person who'll feed your cat if you want to go away, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of the difference between artificial and genuine type friendship, right? Friends do things for other friends, right? To assist them along their path, right? So.
I always, when people talk about that, I always think of the great scene in A Christmas Carol, right? And Scrooge has died, and the other businessmen are like, well, we should probably have a funeral. And, he's like, well, will there be sandwiches served there? And it's like, well, they're weighing out, well, is it worth it? And I think that if, people are standing around determining whether they're going to go to your funeral, if their sandwiches or not, or a free lunch, probably you may have missed the mark a little.
That's a valid point. Yeah.
So I think, if I die tomorrow, are people going to be worried about what they're serving for lunch, or some people going to show up and say, yeah, he was all right. So, that's the extent of my moral compass right there. No, seriously. So getting back to getting back to Adam Grant and how you get from languishing to flourishing, and I think it's really interesting. And he brings up a guy, you and I were talking about it before the show started, by the name of Scott Kelly, and I was going to pull him up. He's a very famous astronaut. He is famous for having spent 340 some days in the International Space Station.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's a 4-time veteran. Can you believe that? So, pilot of the space shuttle, serviced the Hubble Space Telescope. Like, this dude is like, he's been there and back. And really interestingly, they interviewed him about the time he spent, and people talk about working remotely. Well, that dude wins the prize. There's no more remotely than the International Space Station.
Man, he must be like the toughest person in the world, kind of a thing, to be able to do that, right? Because a lot of that time he was by himself there too, right?
Yeah, that's what it says. The guy, it's worth it. Look it up if you're interested. He's got like a ton of stuff that he's done. He certainly has got good mileage out of his life anyway, and really interesting. But yeah, so he broke the record for the longest stay outside of the planet Earth, which was 340 days, is what the article said. I have no reason not to believe that. And he was asked what skill allowed him to cope with that environment, right? It's cramped, it's small, that, you go to bathroom in this vacuum, closet thing, your food's floats around, it's in toothpaste form, you're by yourself. How do you deal with even one of those things? Most of us would have a lot of problems dealing with. For me, it'd be the claustrophobia. There has to be open space around me somewhere. Must be the cowboy in me, but that would be like being locked in like the first floor of a small house for a year.
Yeah. Wow. I guess there's like sunrises and sunsets on the International Space Station, I assume, or how does that work?
Well, I think they're in asynchronous orbit, right? So they're always over, I don't know. No satellites are in asynchronous orbit. Good question. So some satellites are always above us, right?
Yeah.
And some pass over us. So the ones that are always above us will get day and night the same as we do. And I think they call that synchronous orbit. And then asynchronous orbit are the ones that go past us and they're on their own revolution, right? So it depends on how fast they're traveling, but it's like a gear. They're traveling faster than we are. No.
Right.
Yeah. We're in the center, and then they're following an orbit that's much bigger than our orbit of the Earth, right? We're turning around the Earth. Well, the Earth. Now, don't blame me for that. I'm not a flat earther. I understand. But this position I'm in right now is circling, right? So as we go through the solar system on our orbit and tilting and turning.
I'm sorry, I got us off track there a little bit, but
Yeah.
I was just curious because that would even make it harder if you didn't like you had nothing to kind of mark here. This is a new day, right? Like, and I'm not certain that's how it works, but that would make it even considerably harder. I mean, 340 days on your own for most of that, and in that confined environment, I agree with you, it'd be horribly hard. But then as well, if there was no indication of another day has passed kind of a thing, you don't have that kind of a sensation, that would even be harder still, I would think. So,
well, I think the answer to that is, and I'm quite sure somebody will correct my research, is that I think it depends. And I think that it depends on how far out they are and the angle of the Earth and the sun and wherever they're located, whether they see a sunrise and sunset, right? Because it's like the Arctic, when the farther you get out to the poles, the longer night and day go, right? Like night can be 6 months. So I would assume that they would, depending on where they orbit, would determine how long their days and nights are.
You know what? It's not important for our talk tonight. And if any of our viewers wants to give us a little fact check and say, actually, this is how it works, please bring it on.
Just email and say, Sweetman's talking out his ass again. He has no idea. Yeah, because I'm guessing, but I think, all the science fiction movies I've ever watched, I never wanted to be an astronaut. Did you ever want to be an astronaut?
No.
No, me either.
And I never want to be actually on like where you're out in a boat, like where there's big waves and such like that. No thanks. Like a calm bay is good, but man, no way would I want to be like out on a violent ocean somewhere, or even in an ocean where there's so many strange critters under there. My goodness, that's
dark water sickness. I was in Sea Cadets, and I always wanted to be on a battleship. Like commanding a battleship was like, when I was a kid, that was a big deal because battleships don't move quickly. They're big. So you have to think way ahead. The strategy of a battleship, yes, they have lots of power. Yes, they have lots of armor, but they move slow by comparison to the ships that are designed to destroy battleships, right?
Right.
And airplanes and all kinds of other things that move way faster than they do. So the officers have to be very strategic in how and when they move that battleship to make sure that they're not putting their crew and their ship in much great harm. And I always thought that would be okay, except I have a very unnatural fear of deep water. I snuck downstairs as a kid and I saw Jaws when I was like tiny, I don't know. And War of the Worlds was the first one I snuck down and saw, and I was scared of light fixture, the big street lights. Because the original War of the Worlds, that was the monster. So when first time I went to the city, I was like, ah! Anyway, trauma. Second one was Jaws. Da-dun, da-dun. Man, if I went into deep water, if I was on a battleship or any kind of ship and it sunk and I had to go into deep water, I hope that I have a gun because I ain't going live into that water. No way. No way. And space to me is just the same as an endless ocean, I think. So.
Yes, I agree. Let's get back to the legacy.
No, let's talk about our childhood trauma some more, Al.
All right.
Let me book in some therapy here. I'll be back. No. Getting back to, Anyway, the dude has whatever it takes to be like the man.
Incredible.
Really, really incredible. And he said, apparently, that the one thing that he really focused on, and I think this is brilliant, is that, of course, when you're getting ready to go, you're scared, but you're excited, right? Like, I'm going to space, man. You're jacked. You feel positive. You feel, he wouldn't be there if you weren't like super positive and stoked about going, right? And he was determined that when he came back, he wanted to be just as excited and just as positive. After almost a year in a flying closet, or basically in a hard drive bay in a big flying computer. How do you do that, right? Like, how do you, and what he did was something psychologists call mental time machining. Let me check and see that I didn't just hack that up on my own. Yeah, that's what it's called. It's a psychological or mental time machine. And mental time travel, that's what they call it. So he would imagine coming home and feeling the excitement and the positivity of coming home, and how it just wouldn't be hysteria to be back on Earth, and you develop routines, right? You develop comfort, and the sounds. I know when I was in intensive care, all the beeping and sounds became comforting to me. And when they changed after 4 months only, when they would change, it would cause me anxiety, right? Because it wasn't the normal sound of my environment. And I imagine after a year in a place where there's all kinds of, background noise and equipment and beeps and things, that your brain would be the normal environment. And then you're suddenly in a quiet taxi ride, home after a year in outer space. What goes on in your head at that point, right? Like a lot of things. But Mr. Kelly, Scott Kelly, he focused on this mental time travel. And psychologists say that we all have the ability to rewind or fast forward our imagination. So, and it's an extremely helpful tool. We can go backwards and imagine ourselves reacting differently to a situation that we feel we reacted poorly to, or maybe that, left us traumatized, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just thinking that I could go back now, time travel to, I remember sneaking down the stairs. I remember the carpeting and the terrible 60s paneling on the stairwell, and, the little TV, which was big for its time. I think it was like maybe a 12-inch or something. Yes, I was alive when black and white TV was still a thing on the farm anyway. And I could travel back to that. And I'm like, now I know the special effects. I know that it wasn't a real shark. I know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so Adam Grant talks about how we can all use this time traveling, this imagination time travel, to create energy enthusiasm day to day.
So basically, so if I'm following you, it's basically where you're imagining what the future will be like in such positive, glowing terms that it makes it easy to get through the today. Is that kind of?
Yeah. And psychologists have found, and we've talked about this before, is you don't need to win a marathon to increase your happiness. You just need to feel like you've moved the needle forward a bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. And let's say, okay, this is the end of the day, and I did move my needle forward a lot, but let's say it was a day that I hadn't, and I'm sitting here and I can either start languishing about, oh, I wish I would have got more done today, and I wish, this call, the person wasn't in, and this person didn't answer my email. So I can languish about that, or I can imagine, okay, I am going to get that phone call tomorrow. The person is going to call me back. How am I going to respond? Am I going to show my slight frustration that they didn't call me back today? Or am I going to share my positivity about what I have to talk with them about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And so Grant and Kelly and the psychologists behind this are saying that we can really use that mental time travel to beat stagnation, ennui, languishing, all of those things that take that the lead in our pencil, that steam out of our engine, and leave us feeling like back to the grind today.
You know what this reminds me of? You've read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So you know that where he said that the people who were in concentration camps that survived is because they had like a purpose for their survival, that they were going to be reunited with their loved ones. They were going to do something, write the book, do something once they were out. And so they had a kind of a vision for their future that allowed them to endure horrible atrocities today in light of that this future was going to occur yet, right? And so they had hope because of that reason, right? So
well, and that's interesting because psychologists, and we've talked about it a lot on this show, is imagination isn't just a pinstripe on the on our it's actually a survival mechanism. And by a pinstripe, it's not just, oh, lucky our species has imagination, woohoo. No, it helps us survive, because not only can we think about a time, we can imagine it. We could almost taste it and feel it. And I know when I was in coma, it was real. I couldn't tell any difference between my brain was imagining and what I'm doing right now. Zero difference. Now, of course, when you're conscious, you can tell, oh, I'm imagining this, right? But the better you get at it, the more you exercise that imagination muscle, the more you can bring that forward or backward as a tool to bring that energy, that power, that meaning back into whatever experience you're having right at this moment. Pretty cool stuff, eh?
It is very cool. It is very cool. How long were you in a coma again?
4 months. I was
4
out.
months.
Yeah, I was in 3 months and a bit, and then they brought me back out for a day, but I wasn't all the way out. No, that's not true. So they tried to bring me out. They couldn't get me out. And I think I've said before, it's not like they just turn off whatever drug they're giving you to make you in coma. They actually have to give you more drugs to bring you back out of coma. Tried that once, failed. I didn't come out. Tried it again. They got me out for 24 hours, but my vitals all crashed. My system started failing again. And I remember that short period. It was a 24-hour period, but I have like an hour's memory of it. I remember seeing my family. I remember talking to my family. I remember the doctor coming to me and saying, in the doctor who spoke English saying, "I'm sorry, you have to go back." And I was like, my family's there. And I didn't really have a sense that I had been in a coma then. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it didn't stress me out, because when I finally woke up, I had to ask, well, how long? I'm thinking like 3 days, 4 days, and they're like, everyone's looking at each other. It's like one of those weird moments in a movie. And then, Fleur's like, yeah, 4 months. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it was pretty weird. But I can honestly say, without any hyperbole, what I experienced in wherever I was in my own head, it was as real as this. I cannot. And when I came out, there was a transitional period, and I lived in both worlds. I could see them both sort of overlaid at each other. And yeah, luckily the medical team was prepared for that, and they prepared my family for that. And it was really weird because I was living in two places at once.
During that period of time, were you breathing on your own, or would you have you had a respirator, eh? Okay.
Everything, yeah. So I had lost. That was the problem. The infection was in my lungs, so my lungs were shutting down. By the time they started, by the time they got me to the big hospital, they're like, he's got 20 minutes max. Like, we don't have a choice. Give us your consent, or he's done. And Fleur's like, yeah, crack him, do whatever you got to do. And I don't remember. I just remember like them all sort of like they were all here talking to Fleur, and then they were all like coming in. And that's the last thing I remember of being awake. I remember the ambulance ride. I remember coming into the big hospital. I remember crying and people upset and the doctors, but I was struggling to breathe. Right. And so when you're suffocating, you get sort of euphoric. You kind of float. I don't know how to explain it, but like I was suffocating, and yeah. So they started cutting my clothes off. They started IVs and everything, and then it was the girls. There's a story. The girls, when they first came in, and they were allowed to them because they didn't think I was going to live, right? So they wanted to give the girls a chance to see me. Whatever. The girls were young, 4 years old or something, and they said, oh, there's robots keeping Daddy alive, and because they didn't want the girls horrified, I was on an intubator. I had kidneys that was what failed. That's what was failing when they said he's done for. His lungs are shut down. His renal system is next. and then, you know, they're just going to fall one right after the other, and then he'll be brain dead if we don't take action now.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, yeah, for me, not as traumatic as the people around me, I imagine. Like,
Yeah.
I just remember sort of it floating away as they, you know, as either I suffocated out and passed out, or the drugs took effect. So
Wow.
my departure was very gentle. Waking up about the same, actually. But during coma was not fun. I dreamt about my family being tortured and killed the whole time.
Ooh.
And good and evil. That was the only other thing that was in that world. Trying to understand the nature of good and evil. So
wow.
yeah.
It appears I got us off track again. I apologize for that.
Sure.
Yeah. So back to the whole thriving thing, from languishing to thriving.
But that was a very good point, because I can say that quite honestly, that if you practice, like, yes, I'm a creative and I do work with my imagination, but I believe we all have an imagination. I believe it's part of what's made our species the dominant one on Earth. I think, you know, the whole tool development and use, that takes imagination, that takes creativity. And I think that this is a really simple tool. And if people practice imagining the positive outcomes they want, either past or forward, they're gonna find that it affects their investment in the now, their energy in the now.
Mm-hmm. That's a great insight. That's a great insight.
Yeah. So
where are we on time, Scott?
We're done. We're 31 minutes, 40 seconds.
Almost did it on time.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any closing points we got to make here?
Yeah. Just exercise that imagination. I'm a little worried. I hear so many people tell me they're depressed, and, you know, just in everyday life. Oh, how are you doing? Well, I've been depressed, you know, and then it's like, oh, you know, like doctor kind of depressed, or no, I haven't talked to a doctor, but I'm pretty sure I've got depression. And that may be the case. Go see a doctor. But remember, there's a whole spectrum of intermediate stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
Like, clinical depression is a fair way down that road.
But what we have learned from tonight, the summary here, is that imagination is a capacity that we have that we can develop more fully. And then in so doing, we can imagine a better future that even if we're not there today, it's going to fuel us and make today better in anticipation of a brighter tomorrow. Is that a good summary?
Yeah. And the part that's really interesting as well, and not really covered in this article, but we can talk about it another time, is you can go backward too.
Right.
And it hints at the power of being able to revisit things you wanted to do better, and that you will actually psychologically benefit from imagining you said something different, right? That's not denying the truth, but that's giving yourself the permission to experience a reality where you say the right thing, or you make the right choice, or, you know, so yeah, imagination is powerful, and it can improve your happiness and the quality of your life, I think, is the short version.
Woohoo! That's a great summary. Take us on home, Scott. We're done for tonight.
Well, thank you, Mr. Allan Friesen, the acapellist, my dear friend, and thank you all watching us. My name's Scott Sweetman. We will see you next Thursday, hopefully with some guests, and we'll be here, same place, same time, 7 p.m.
Get 'em out, Sin.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.